Winston Churchill.
The
All right.
dangers of prostitutes and choking on cars.
Let's look at the audience real quick. All 6 of them.
Richie being so engaged.
All right. Sweet. Ready to go? If you're going through hell, keep going. This famous quote was first uttered by Winston Churchill, the most famous prime minister in British history. And so today, we're going to be honoring the deceased Mr. Churchill as we examine his early life and rise in politics, his role in World War II, and finally his memory after he passed away. So first, looking at his early life, Winston Churchill was born on November 30th, 1874. And the New York Times tells us on July 15th, 2016, as they recount history, that he first entered into Parliament in 1900 and he became Prime Minister in 1940. And throughout Winston Churchill's childhood, he was known as somebody who was disobedient, who had the potential to do well in school if it was a subject that he enjoyed, but that otherwise did whatever he wanted, caused problems, and overall was known as someone who was a bit of a nuisance. However, he excelled in wartime in his military classes, and people always believed that he would have the ability to do well in politics if they entered a war crisis situation. Which brings us to World War II, where former UK Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain stepped down as World War II began to intensify because he didn't want to handle this crisis for his people. He tried to pass it off to his second-in-command of the country, and the second-in-command said no. And so it passed to Winston Churchill, who, according to the Churchill Institute, says he accepted it with gusto, stepped into the spotlight, and decided that it was time to prepare the English people for what he called their finest hour. And so Winston Churchill steps up in World War II, grits his teeth, and basically preaches a message to the people that they are strong enough to withstand the Axis powers. Furthermore, he pushed for something called the Grand Alliance, in which he saw himself allied with the United States, France, and Russia to stop Germany. And this is something that's incredibly admirable, because according to Encyclopedia Britannica, on November 30, 2008, Winston Churchill hated communism and hated communists, and yet he saw Adolf Hitler as a greater threat, so he went out of his way to try to make a peace pact with Russia so that they could work together to accomplish a greater good. And this is one of the things that he's best remembered for. But finally, after leading the UK to victory in World War II and serving as Prime Minister until 1955 when he had to retire due to health issues, he passed away. So we're going to look at his memory after death. And what we see is the Chicago Tribune tells us on January 3rd, 2014, as it recounts his life, that he passed away on January 24th of 1965. He died an old man, loved by his people, at 90 years old. And furthermore, as we look at the memory of Winston Churchill, we see things like the Winston Churchill Institute and Society, which was founded shortly after his death to be a constant memorial to him, so that people could always have good insight regarding this man's life and accomplishments as one of the greatest prime ministers that Britain has ever had. Recently, he was rated as one of the most influential politicians of all time, and it's sure that he has been remembered as one of the greatest historical figures with some of the most impressive accomplishments that has ever been recorded as he led his people to victory, holding the Allied powers together during World War II. So ultimately, as we revisit Winston Churchill, his early life, his role in World War II, and his memory as a great, great man, we see that this particular individual had all of the grit necessary to utter those famous words. If you're going through hell, keep going, as he led his nation to triumph. All right.
See the people.
We are here. Yummy.
All right.